It's astonishing how quickly you can shift from being the perfect couple to feeling like complete strangers sharing the same space. That's precisely how things were between Lily and me. To everyone else, we were the ideal couple, married for over a decade, always grinning at family gatherings, looking like we had everything under control. But recently, it felt like a dense fog had settled between us, casting a shadow over everything. I used to know Lily inside and out. A single glance at her would tell me exactly what was on her mind. Yet suddenly she seemed miles away, cold. It felt as if the warmth had drained from her laughter, and she'd look at me as if I were just another face in the crowd, not the man she'd shared years of her life with. And then there was Ethan. I always considered him like a younger brother. He grew up alongside our family friends, and when he moved to the city for college, I was excited to have him close by. I even helped him find a place to live, and he would drop by frequently, whether it was for dinner, a chat, or just to hang out. Initially, it felt great to take on that big brother role, you know? But then his visits started to become strange. He'd show up at odd hours, sometimes even late at night. Just study stress, he'd say, or some nonsense about a rough day. That's when I started noticing Lily. Lily was never one to get overly friendly with just anyone. She usually kept her distance. But when Ethan was around, it was like a light switch flipped. Suddenly, she was all smiles and laughter, hanging onto his every word. At first, it was subtle, but then it escalated to the point where it felt as though they had created their own little universe. They would step out of the room for these private conversations, leaving me behind like some clueless fool, nursing my beer and trying to convince myself it was all innocent. I mean, what was I supposed to think? It's just Ethan, I'd tell myself. He's practically family. Yet things began to feel off. Really off. One evening, I came home from work to find Lily cooking dinner. Nothing unusual, right? But she was glued to her phone, beaming as if she had just read the world's funniest joke. The moment she noticed me, she flipped her phone face down on the table, and her entire demeanor shifted. She tried to act casual, but after so many years together, I knew her too well to ignore it. I brushed it off and attempted to keep my cool, but that was when the nagging doubt really took root. Who on earth was she texting? From that point on, things only spiraled downward. Have you ever felt like a third wheel in your own home? That's precisely how I felt. It was as if they had developed this secret language, these inside jokes, and I was just there. I'd hear her laugh in a way that hadn't echoed between us in months, and it twisted my insides like a knife. One night, I returned home early, only to find them in the kitchen, heads huddled together, sharing a laugh. As I entered, they fell silent, like they had been caught red-handed. I attempted to brush it off with a smile and asked, "What's so funny?" But Lily barely allowed me to finish before she abruptly shifted the conversation. The way she did it was too quick, too rehearsed. My stomach churned, but I still tried to convince myself I was just imagining things. Let's be honest. Once those kinds of thoughts start creeping in, there's no turning back. It's like a persistent itch that you can't scratch. I found myself watching her closely, searching for any signs. I started checking her social media when she wasn't paying attention, combing through her call logs, even sneaking glances at her messages. And guess what? Nothing. Not a single thing. But that only deepened my unease. The cleaner her phone appeared, the more guilty it felt. It was as if she was going out of her way to erase any evidence, and I was losing my mind trying to connect the dots. And the worst part? I still couldn't bring myself to accept it. I would lie awake at night, staring at the ceiling, questioning whether I was just being paranoid. Maybe it was all in my head. Perhaps Ethan was simply Ethan, and I was just overanalyzing everything. But that persistent voice in my head, it wouldn't stop. It kept urging me to dig deeper, to uncover the truth. I knew I couldn't confront her just yet. I realized that. I mean, what would I even say? "Hey, honey, I think you're sleeping with the kid I've known since he was 10. Yeah, that would definitely not go over well. So, I decided to tread carefully, to keep my mouth shut and my eyes wide open. The more I investigated, the more I understood that whatever was happening was only the beginning. I had no clue how far it would go, but I sensed it wouldn't end well. It wasn't long before my suspicions became unbearable. Living with that gnawing doubt day in and day out was driving me up the wall. Every time I looked at Lily, I found myself staring too long, wondering if she could detect the anger in my gaze. Or worse, if she somehow realized that I was onto her. I knew I had to uncover the truth, one way or another. But how? That's when I reached out to Ryan. Ryan and I go way back, like high school buddies back. The kind of friend who has always had my back. And it just so happened that Ryan became a private investigator, which at that moment felt like a twisted stroke of luck. I needed someone I could rely on, and who better than a buddy, who knew me better than I knew myself. Still, even bringing it up felt odd. This was Lily, my wife, my partner. But I couldn't just brush it aside. One night, I called Ryan, my voice trembling and my heart racing. He picked up on the tension right away. "What's going on, man?" he asked. I hesitated for a moment, confessing that I thought my wife might be cheating isn't exactly easy, even with your best friend. But eventually, it all spilled out. The late nights, the cryptic texts, the way she and Ethan interacted when they thought I wasn't paying attention. Ryan listened patiently as I vented my frustrations, and when I finally finished, he told me something I already knew. I had to tread carefully. "Listen, jealousy can mess with your head," he said. "You might be imagining things that aren't really happening. Are you sure you're not just projecting?" It felt like he was offering me a lifeline, a last chance to step back from the precipice I was teetering on. But I knew the truth. Deep down, I was certain I wasn't losing my mind. My instincts were screaming at me, and I had to listen. "No, Estef. I need to find out the truth. I can't keep living like this." My voice cracked as I spoke, and that's when he relented. He agreed to follow Lily, monitor her routine, and see if anything suspicious cropped up. The plan was to keep it discreet, a few weeks of surveillance to gather some insight. Part of me hoped he'd discover nothing, that I was just being paranoid. But another part of me wanted to be right, to prove that my suspicions weren't unfounded. Those weeks stretched on forever. Each day, I'd anxiously await a text from Ryan, hoping it would read "all clear." But each time, silence. I tried to carry on with my life as if everything was normal, playing the dutiful husband while Lily cooked dinner or chatted away on the phone with her friends. Yet deep inside, the anxiety was eating me alive. Then one day, Ryan called. "We need to talk. Now." The urgency in his tone hit me like a freight train. We met at our bar, the one we had frequented for years, where we'd shared laughs and beers over life's absurdities. This time, however, there was no laughter. When I walked in, Ryan was already seated, a file laid out in front of him, looking as if he were about to deliver the worst news of my life. "Man, I don't even know how to break this to you," he started, running a hand through his hair, anxiety etched on his face. That's when I sensed something was very wrong. He slid the file across the table, and my hands were shaking so badly I nearly couldn't open it. But when I did, it felt as if the world came to a screeching halt. There they were, pictures of Lily and Ethan. Not just casual snapshots like you'd expect from family friends, but intimate moments. Photos of them at cafes, sitting uncomfortably close, their faces just inches apart. Then there were images from his apartment, with her hand resting on his chest. And the worst one, Lily leaving his place in the dead of night. I must have turned pale. My heart just stopped. I don't know how long I sat there, staring at those damning photos, trying to wrap my head around it all. I kept telling myself it had to be a mistake, that there must be another explanation. But the harsh reality was right in front of me, glaring back. My wife, the woman I had trusted above all, was betraying me. And not with just anyone. She was with Ethan, the guy I had welcomed into our home like family. I wanted to confront her right then and there, to shove those photos in her face and watch her shatter. But something restrained me. Maybe it was shock, or maybe I just wasn't prepared to hear the lies she would spin to justify it all. Regardless, I knew I had to bide my time, to figure out how to play my cards and manage the inevitable fallout. So, I made a choice. I would act as if nothing had changed. Each day, I'd smile and kiss her good morning, while inside, I felt like I was being consumed by flames. I had to pretend I didn't know about all the times she had snuck off to meet Ethan. It was the most agonizing act I'd ever had to perform, lying to her face while being acutely aware of her deceit. I started paying close attention, scrutinizing every move she made. Every time she checked her phone, I would force a smile and casually ask how her day was, as if nothing was amiss. Each time she laughed at a message, I felt my stomach knot, knowing it was probably from him. I was waiting, strategizing, trying to determine the best way to end this nightmare. And man, it was torture. Watching them together while knowing what was happening behind my back. It took everything I had to keep my cool. But the more I bottled it up, the more I realized I didn't just want to catch her. I needed to ensure she never saw it coming. And when that moment arrived, it was going to hurt. A lot. Living a lie changes you. It makes you cold and calculating. By that point, I had transformed into a different man, a man on a mission. I needed to witness it for myself, to have that undeniable proof staring back at me. The photographs were one thing, but they were merely frozen moments in time, you know? I needed to catch them in the act, to see it unfold. Maybe it was masochistic, or maybe I was just so enraged that I needed to watch everything burn to the ground. But I knew what I had to do. So I told Lily I had a business trip lined up, some conference a few cities away that would keep me occupied for a few days. She didn't probe too much, which made it easier. In her eyes, I was still the oblivious husband, and she could continue her little affair without me around. But before I left, I made sure to set up hidden cameras throughout the house, bedroom, living room, kitchen, all the spots where I thought the two of them might get comfortable. Then, I didn't actually leave. I booked a rundown motel across town and waited there. I'd obsessively check my phone, refreshing the app linked to the cameras, my hands trembling every time I logged in. Each minute felt like an hour, and I couldn't decide what would be worse, if Ethan showed up or if he didn't. But, of course, he showed up. Just a couple of nights into my trip, I was hit with the moment I had dreaded most. I reviewed the footage, and there they were, strolling through the front door, Lily holding Ethan's hand as if they were on some twisted honeymoon. They glided into the living room, and I could see her face, grinning, laughing like a lovesick teenager. I watched as they moved into the kitchen, pouring wine and getting far too cozy, until she leaned in and kissed him. It felt as if time itself had come to a grinding halt. My entire world stopped. Things only escalated from there. They stumbled into our bedroom, my bedroom, and that was the moment I hit the off switch on the feed. I couldn't stomach the thought of them dismantling the remnants of my dignity. But I didn't need to see more. This was the undeniable proof I had been dreading, laid bare before me. The following morning found me sitting in that motel room, numb and dazed, my eyes glued to my phone. The damning footage was there, all saved and ready to be unleashed. I replayed the scenes in my mind repeatedly, wondering how I had managed to overlook the signs for so long. But I knew confronting Lily in a typical fashion wasn't an option. No, I wanted to make sure that she and Ethan would carry the weight of this betrayal forever, to remember what they had done to me, to our marriage. That's when I hatched the plan to wait until our wedding anniversary. It's twisted, I know, but it felt like the perfect opportunity. One day she'd never suspect anything was amiss. I suggested a small dinner, just the three of us, family style, like we used to enjoy. She thought it was a sweet gesture, convinced that I was simply in the mood for a cozy night to celebrate us. But all the while, I was scheming, plotting, waiting for the perfect moment to drop the bomb. On the day of the dinner, I was a bundle of nerves. I went through the motions, setting the table, engaging in small talk, even cracking a few jokes to keep the mood light. Yet inside, I felt like I was being consumed by flames, a seething rage building within me, poised to erupt. They had no clue, no idea that their secret was about to explode in their faces. As we sat down to eat, it felt like a scene ripped from a dark comedy. Lily and Ethan were across from me, laughing and acting as if everything was perfectly normal. I maintained my composure, but each second felt like I was choking on my own fury. And then, when the moment was right, I stood up and snatched my laptop from the counter. Before we dig into dessert, I have something to share with you both, I announced, my voice surprisingly steady. They looked at me with curiosity, grinning without a hint of what was coming their way. I opened the laptop, connected it to the TV, and hit play. Within seconds, the footage began to roll. Lily and Ethan entering our home, hand in hand. Their expressions fell instantly. Lily's eyes widened in disbelief, and she turned to me, her face a mixture of shock and terror. Ethan, the cocky little jerk, attempted to say something. What is this? It's not what it looks like, but I cut him off. Oh, it's exactly what it looks like, I replied, forcing myself to stay calm even though my hands were trembling. Why don't we watch the rest? And we did. We watched them giggle and kiss their way through the kitchen, watched them stumble into the bedroom. When the screen finally went dark, I turned to face them. Lily looked ghostly pale, as if she had just seen a specter. Ethan sat there, frozen, speechless. I almost savored that silence, relishing that fleeting moment where they had no idea how to fabricate their way out of this. Of course, Lily was the first to break the silence. Tears streamed down her face as she began her tirade of excuses. Jack, please. I was lonely. I felt abandoned. And you were never there for me. I needed someone to lean on. Blah, blah, blah. You know how it goes. Somehow, it all became my fault. Every ounce of her betrayal. Every time she'd snuck out to be with Ethan. Somehow it was because I had failed as a husband. And Ethan, that little coward, tried to play it off as a mistake, some heat-of-the-moment nonsense. But I couldn't care less about their excuses. Their words merely bounced off me like raindrops on glass. All I felt was a deep, chilling emptiness. It was as if everything I had built with Lily, the love, the trust, had been wiped clean in an instant. I watched them squirm, waiting for me to lash out, to yell, cry, or hit something, anything. But instead, I just smiled. Happy anniversary, babe. And with that, I walked out, leaving them in their web of lies and shame, taking my first steps toward dismantling everything they held dear. Catching them was just the beginning. The truth is, witnessing Lily and Ethan squirm before me was not enough. Far from it. Sure, I could have simply filed for divorce and left them to their miserable little affair. But that felt far too easy. I wasn't just going to erase them from my life. I wanted them to feel the sting of every single lie they told, to see their idyllic little world engulfed in flames. I knew precisely where to start, Ethan. The little punk believed he had his whole future ahead of him. Bright, promising, untouched by consequence. But that was before he chose to ruin my marriage. I had heard through the grapevine that he had a significant presentation coming up at his university, a crucial moment for his academic career. So, I made it my mission to find out exactly when and where it was happening. That's when I decided to make my move. On the day of the presentation, I strolled into that auditorium, calm on the surface, but boiling with rage beneath. I spotted him standing in front of the crowd. Professors, students, all eyes trained on him. He was so full of himself, so incredibly arrogant, and I knew it was time to wipe that smug grin right off his face. I waited until he was halfway through his presentation, right when he thought he had everyone completely enthralled. That's when I sprang to my feet and shouted, "Hey, Ethan, why don't you tell everyone here what you've really been up to? Like, for instance, sleeping with a married woman." You could have heard a pin drop in that auditorium. All eyes swung toward me, and Ethan's face drained of color. I could see panic flicker in his eyes, his hands trembling as he stammered out some feeble excuse. But there was no way he could talk his way out of this. "That's right," I continued, making sure my voice boomed across the room. "This little snake has been having an affair with my wife, sneaking around behind my back, pretending to be an innocent student. Well, now you all know the truth." Gasps filled the air, whispers erupted, and people exchanged glances like they were watching some sensational drama unfold. The best part? There was nowhere for him to hide. No escape. He stood frozen, the weight of his actions crashing down on him. And crash it did. The university was not about to tolerate one of their own being involved in a scandal like that, especially one as public as the spectacle I had just orchestrated. Within days, they called him in and gave him the boot. Just like that, his promising academic career was in shambles. All those dreams he had built, gone in an instant. But that was just the beginning. See, Ethan wasn't the only one who needed to pay. Lily had betrayed me just as profoundly, and I was determined to ensure she felt every ounce of shame, just like I had. So I began plotting, devising a way to expose them both, not just to each other, but to everyone in our lives. What better way to do that than by gathering all our friends and family for a nice little gathering? I orchestrated everything, sent out the invitations, arranged the food, and told everyone I had some important family news to share. Lily, poor fool, thought I was merely trying to put everything behind us and move on. She even went to the effort of dressing up for the party, as if a new outfit could erase all the damage she'd done. But that only made my plans sweeter. On the night of the party, our closest friends, along with both our families, packed into our living room, laughing, drinking, and catching up. Lily and Ethan were there, too, of course, acting as if nothing had changed. I waited until the room was alive with chatter and laughter, everyone feeling good, enjoying themselves. Then, I stood up, raising my glass like I was about to make a heartfelt toast. "Thanks for coming, everyone," I began, forcing a smile. "I truly appreciate you all being here. And I have some news, something I think you'll all want to see." With that, I pulled out my laptop just like before and hooked it up to the TV. I could see Lily's face fall, her eyes darting around like a trapped animal. But it was far too late for her to stop me. The video began to play, and there it was, her and Ethan cozying up, kissing, all laid bare for everyone to witness. The reactions were priceless. Gasps filled the air, stunned silence followed, and then whispers erupted, people pointing, covering their mouths in disbelief. Lily sat there, her face flushed bright red, her hands trembling as she scrambled to conjure some pathetic excuse. But there were no words that could salvage this. And Ethan? He remained seated, looking like a deer caught in headlights, powerless to do anything but watch as his reputation crumbled around him. The fallout was swift and brutal. Friends who had known us for years turned away in disgust. Even her family couldn't bear to look at her. By the end of the evening, Lily had gone from the perfect wife to the woman who had betrayed her husband in the most appalling way. Just like that, her entire social circle began to dissolve. But still, I wasn't finished. Lily was going to understand what it felt like to lose everything, just like I had. So, I escalated my plan. I targeted her job. I reached out to the management at her company, played the role of the concerned husband, and spilled the beans about her unethical relationship with Ethan. They had a strict code of conduct, no funny business, no scandals, and I exploited that ruthlessly. It didn't take much convincing before they fired her. Just like that, she was stripped of her job, her friends, and left with nothing to her name. Now, you might think all this would leave me feeling vindicated, that the revenge would somehow mend the gaping wound she had inflicted on my life. But if anything, it only deepened my emptiness. Sure, there was a grim satisfaction in watching them both pay for their actions, in knowing they would have to start from scratch. Yet, there was also this pervasive darkness inside me, an anger I couldn't shake off. It was as if I had set the world ablaze, and I was still standing amidst the ashes, all alone. As much as I wanted to move forward, to let it all go, I couldn't. Not yet. Because every time I replayed their betrayal in my mind, the lies they had spun, the way they had torn our lives apart, all I wanted was to make them suffer just a bit more. And I couldn't tell if that made me strong or just as broken as they were. You'd think after everything, Lily would have the decency to walk away quietly. But no. After the fallout from the party, she had the audacity to act like the victim. It wasn't long before she filed for divorce. And not just any divorce. She aimed to take everything. The house, the money, all of it. She wanted to bleed me dry. And I could see it in her eyes every time we met. Gone was any trace of guilt or shame. She was all business, ready to claw her way into whatever she could seize. By that point, I had already experienced every emotion under the sun: anger, sadness, disgust. And what remained was one unwavering sentiment: cold determination. I recognized that this was bound to get messy, and I wasn't about to let her take more than her fair share. So, I secured legal representation. I found myself a top-notch divorce attorney, someone who wasn't afraid to stand her ground. We dedicated countless hours to reviewing everything: finances, property, and the sordid specifics of the affair, and I felt fully prepared to fight. However, sitting across from Lily in that courtroom was a new level of torment. As I looked at her, it felt as if I was staring at a stranger. There she was, all dolled up, donning a facade of innocence, while she unleashed a torrent of lies, twisting every little aspect of our marriage to portray me as the villain. He was always distant, she claimed, unfeeling, always too busy for me. She crafted a narrative of our life together that resembled some sort of prison, as if I had kept her trapped, starved for affection and attention. And then came the tears, those phony, crocodile tears that set my blood boiling. But I was prepared for her antics. I anticipated her attempts to play the victim, so I had everything meticulously organized. The cherry on top? I had Ethan. When he took the stand, the look on Lily's face was absolutely priceless. You could practically see the panic wash over her as she realized that this little sneak she'd been involved with wasn't going to support her story. He recounted everything to the court, how they had been meeting behind my back, the duration of the affair, every nauseating detail. And then there was the evidence, the photos, the videos, damning proof of every single lie she had spun. It was brutal. Yet that didn't stop Lily from trying to paint me as the bad guy. She pulled out all the stops, dredging up every argument we'd ever had, every moment she could twist into a tale of me being some heartless, indifferent husband. She even spread malicious rumors among our friends, claiming I never truly loved her, that I was emotionally abusive. Sure, a few bought into her narrative, but most people saw right through her facade. The truth had already emerged, and there was no way to bury it again. The entire process felt like a brutal knife fight. Each day brought another jab, another cut, as we battled over every trivial matter. The house, the car, the bank accounts, even the damn furniture. Nothing was off limits. She wanted it all, and I wasn't about to let her take what she didn't deserve. But as time dragged on, the toll began to show. Weeks turned into months, and with each court date and every document that needed signing, my anger hardened into something colder, something resembling steely resolve. I wasn't merely fighting for the assets or the house. I was fighting to rid myself of her once and for all. The turning point arrived when Lily's lawyer started to recognize the inevitable. They realized they had little to stand on, not with Ethan's testimony and the overwhelming evidence stacked against her. They attempted to negotiate, hoping to get me to concede to some last-minute demands. But I held my ground. I refused to let her walk away with more than she was entitled to, and I damn sure wouldn't allow her to exit looking like the hero. I was ready to fight until the bitter end, and they knew it. In the end, the court divided our assets in a manner that felt like both victory and defeat. I sacrificed some money, a share of the house's value, and a few investments, items that seemed significant on paper. But to me, they were just possessions. The real treasure was my freedom. When the judge brought that gavel down, finalizing the divorce, it felt like a massive weight lifted off my shoulders. The anger and pain seemed to dissolve, and I finally felt like I could breathe again. Lily, however, didn't take the news gracefully. After the ruling, she stormed out of the courtroom without even a glance back. I could hear her mumbling under her breath, whining about how unfair it all was, as if she were the one who had been wronged. But at that moment, I didn't give a damn. Let her be furious. Let her scream and shout. All I knew was that she was no longer my concern. She was no longer my wife. Stepping out of that courthouse felt like entering a brand new life. I understood it wouldn't be a cakewalk. Starting over never is. But I was prepared, ready to leave the pain in the past, to rebuild, to move forward. And while I had lost more than I ever imagined I could, I had also gained something invaluable, a fresh start and the realization that I had endured the worst she could throw at me. That day, I walked away with nothing but the clothes on my back and a newfound sense of peace. I didn't know what the future had in store, but one thing was for sure. I was free. Free from Lily. Free from the lies. Free from the anger that had consumed me for far too long. As I walked away from the courthouse, I understood there was no looking back. The moment the divorce was finalized, I realized it was time to embark on a new journey. It wasn't going to be a walk in the park, and honestly, it felt strange being on my own after spending so many years with Lily. Yet, There was also a sense of liberation, a blank canvas, an opportunity to live my life for myself instead of for someone who clearly didn't appreciate it. I packed up whatever remnants of my belongings were left, bid farewell to my old neighborhood, and hit the road. A new city meant a new beginning. However, moving wasn't solely about escaping Lily, although that was a significant factor. It was about rediscovering who I was before everything spiraled out of control. I dove headfirst into all sorts of new experiences, hobbies I had never had the time for, sports events I had previously skipped, and travel to places I had always dreamed of visiting. Initially, it felt odd. For a while, it seemed like her ghost was shadowing me everywhere I went, and the sting of betrayal lingered. But as I distanced myself from that old life, the haunting feelings began to dissipate. I was done with dwelling in the past. But let me be clear, it wasn't all smooth sailing. Trust doesn't magically reappear overnight. Every time I met someone new, whether it was a neighbor, a friend, or just a casual acquaintance, there was always that irritating voice in my head warning, don't get too close. Don't let them in. Thankfully, I had a solid support system, friends who stood by me through the chaos, family who called daily just to check in. They kept me anchored, pulling me out of my funks on those days when it felt impossible to move forward. As for Lily, well, from what I gathered, life wasn't being too kind to her. News of her affair with Ethan spread like wildfire. Small towns thrive on gossip, after all, and she was left to face the consequences alone. Her friends, who had once formed the backbone of her social circle, began to drift away. And with that scandal hanging over her, finding a new job became nearly impossible. I'd be lying if I said I didn't derive some satisfaction from it, knowing she was finally facing the repercussions of her choices. But even that sense of satisfaction eventually faded. She wasn't my concern anymore. Then, out of the blue, I met someone new. It wasn't like those movie moments where you accidentally bump into each other at a coffee shop, lock eyes, and instantly know you've found the one. No, this was much more ordinary. I was at a friend's barbecue, not expecting much, just trying to socialize and keep my spirits up. That's when I struck up a conversation with a woman, someone who was a friend of a friend. She was intelligent and funny, the kind of person who made the world seem a little less bleak. We talked for hours, and for the first time in a long while, that heavy weight in my chest lifted. I didn't feel the need to be on guard or anxious. I just felt normal. After that, we started dating, and things progressed slowly, far slower than they had with Lily. I remained cautious, still apprehensive about putting my heart on the line again. But day by day, she gently helped me let go of the pain. She never pressured me or tried to fix me. She simply listened. And that was exactly what I needed most, to feel heard, to be able to be myself without pretending everything was fine when it wasn't. It's not that the pain vanished completely. I didn't wake up one day and miraculously forget all the turmoil I'd been through. There were still days when I'd find myself replaying those moments, wondering what I could have done differently, questioning why things had to end as they did. But gradually, those moments became less frequent. I learned how to live again, not as Jack, the guy who was cheated on, but just as me. I began to understand that life isn't about clinging to grudges or letting the past consume you. It's about discovering new passions and meeting people who inspire you to get out of bed in the morning. It's about reclaiming your happiness one step at a time. As for Lily, her life never really bounced back from the scandal. It clung to her like a bad odor, and even when she tried to escape it, it followed her. Part of me felt pity for her. I'm not a monster. But at the end of the day, she made her choices, and she had to face the music. I had to deal with mine. As for me, I moved on, slowly, cautiously, but undeniably. I rebuilt my life from the ground up, and while the scars remain, they no longer define me. I reflect on everything that happened, the lies, the betrayal, the rage, and yes, it still hurts, but it no longer consumes me as it once did. It's just part of my narrative, a chapter that has finally closed. And now, I'm eager to write a new one that doesn't revolve around revenge, pain, or regret, but instead focuses on living, on love, on finding the strength to keep moving forward, regardless of how hard the fall may be. Because in the end, That's what life is all about, falling down and rising up time and time again. And after everything, I'm still here, standing on my own 2 feet, ready for whatever comes next.